Hello guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be doing another episode of Block Wars. So, the moss are kind of still regrowing, especially after taking part of the Redstone Empire's territory that they had lost to the Redstone Empire. And they are currently going to just build up a couple houses, get some things going, and they get a little bit of territory that they had wanted from the war. And they grow a little bit more. Hoping to increase military size and proportions. And they gain a soldier. Meanwhile, the Obsidian, who just recently gained the massive territory that the Redstone Empire had gained off of the war after the Redstone Empire collapsed, was they kind of are now building a little bit more and growing their territory. Yeah, I didn't really know where I was going with that sentence, but they decide to expand a little bit more, and they grow their territory a little bit, grow their military force here a tad bit, and they decide that they are going to build a settlement in between the Lapis and them. It's going to be called the War Shelter for them, as it will provide safety for them, but not in the way you would expect. So normally for war shelters or nuke shelters or whatever you want to call them, you will get into the shelter to be safe, but this shelter shelters their main territory from the Lapis over here, and it's basically just to be a buffer zone for the war. So it's not really a shelter, it's more of a defense mechanism, but they want to kind of call it a shelter. And A second buffer zone is also created. And this buffer zone is just a walled off version of the other buffer zone, and it has some more houses. Nothing too special, and they keep this area decently walled off. And even though they don't really own this area, they still kind of take control of it and keep it under their protection because they want to keep the moss at an angle where the moss don't want to be. And the Lapis decide to start their expansionist kind of moves. Seizing this territory within walls and making them more expansive than ever before. Kind of just going how they normally do. And they decide they want to move out a little bit further with their project over here. And they, of course, aren't making massive gains with their territory because they just had seized basically almost the entirety of the Redstone Empire's territory. So they can't gain all too much from this. But with the amount of territory that they do gain, it still is very large in comparison to what most of the other nations are gaining. And they decide that they want to kind of continue growing their military as they still see the Obsidian as a threat and are preparing for a major war against the Obsidian. but their people aren't too optimistic about that, so even though they are a militaristic government, their people still have a voice and still disapprove of any action into conquering right now. Now, the Obsidian people are still looking to defend the raw gold civilization against the sponge, and so of course their military presence is currently still very much in the raw gold nation. But first, we must look over to the Netherite civilization, who is currently very slow and growing, and doesn't want too much growth, but they still do grow a little bit. And so they send out a couple soldiers into the wilderness. And they discover settlements. Very sparse settlements, but settlements. Even though they are very spread out. So they figure out that this civilization is called the Emerald and the Emeralds have been a nation in the past, if you remember, and if you had watched some of the previous videos from a while back. And they weren't all too powerful of a nation, but they still had a decent saying in the world. And the Netherite find out that these are the descendants of the old Emerald Nation, and that their ancestors had fled here, wanting safety and prosperity for their people, and so the Netherite are shocked at finding this. And they decide to build a wall separating their peoples from the Emerald Civilization. Across the river. Wanting to keep their civilizations distance from each other and not have to make much contact. And that's all for the civilizations over there. And currently there are no civilizations popping up around this lake because no people have been introduced to the region. But back with the raw gold and the sponge. The sponge have upgraded their amounts of territory by quite a large amount, seizing some of the surrounding land and also enhancing their military size. Very clearly wanting to keep their empire sustained. They also slightly grow their military over here. They are starting to kind of become too large, or their military is starting to become too large for their own good. And their economy is having immense amounts of trouble and chaos. And their troops continue to go to their borders. But the raw gold civilization also wants territory, and so they too grow their military. But the thing is that they don't grow it near as much because the Obsidian are with them. And the Obsidian are on their side. So they realize that the Obsidian will defend them from attacks. And so the fight starts. Well, the fight already started, but the battle starts, and the raw gold charge upon the sponge and unleash an attack. But secretly they sent troops out behind the sponge, 4 troops, and the sponge don't realize this, so they are in a bit of a situation. And the Obsidian are sending their forces to attack the sponge. And the raw gold are very focused on the outcome of the battle, and they want to see the sponge lose. And the sponge are shocked to find that the Obsidian and the raw gold are working so well together. And they decide to send their full force basically out to this battle to try and win. They only have 2 troops that aren't going to be fighting. And then the 4 troops from the raw gold arrive. They quickly start seizing territory, and the sponge leader falls back, and his soldiers killed, only managing to kill 1 of the raw gold. And 2 of the raw gold soldiers advance on the king or leader, while the 3rd advances from behind the sponge lines. The battle takes place on the mountainside, and the sponge are damaged severely from the fight. And so they retreat. Their leader is killed. And so they capitulate their territory. And the raw gold decides to make a treaty with them that states that lots of the territory will be given up to the raw gold, and that they will seize the mountainside. So the Sponge are only allowed to have a very small military force. Their barracks are completely ransacked, and they can't have a leader. Their population is completely decimated from this war. The Raw Gold also lose a ton of population, but they still seize all this territory, and that is what mostly matters to them. So the Obsidian decide to leave, but that they will keep a general here to make sure that things are going well, and 2 soldiers for the general. So the war ends with, of course, the Raw Gold getting the territory that they wanted, but they also suffer heavy casualties, so they can't really do much yet with this territory. And the Emerald are rediscovered. The Netherrack over there still haven't gotten anything done. The Netherite, on the other hand, have grown in strength, but not much. And the Obsidian and the Lapis continue to prepare for war. And that's just about it for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed. Of course, the Lapis have not gained much or done much. And the Netherrack haven't done anything. But this episode has been a very good episode. And hope to see you guys next time. Please make sure to like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And yeah. Bye, guys.